Howdy, folks, and welcome to Moose Podcast number 355. Bring color to life. How are you folks doing this week? Hope you're staying cool. Hey, with that heat out there, in all seriousness, remember to keep drinking those fluids. Hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Seriously, starting off your day with a solid hit of 8 ounces of water before you even get going. Get that system flowing. You know, as pilots would say, if you're not using the facilities every 2 hours, you're simply not drinking enough. So, hey, it's hot. Drink, guys, drink. At the same time, if you're photographing people or critters in this heat, keep in mind that they're stressed by it as well. Make sure that if they're people, you keep your people hydrated. And if it's critters, don't overstress them. Heat will kill them really fast. Heat affects everything. So, hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Hey, I'm recording on Adobe Podcast Beta again. I was really hoping that the transcript was going to be a little bit better. I did a couple of things, and there's small tweaks, but the transcript will still be there at the podcast blog post. It will be there. Interesting thing that came out yesterday, the day before. Losing track of time. Probably because I'm not hydrating enough, maybe. Anyway, they're saying the podcast bubble has burst. God, it was an interesting thing about social media and how we get information. But anyway, hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm still going to be here. As long as you guys are listening, I'm going to keep trivializing here on the old interweb. So, appreciate your support. I'm right back at you. Also, want to thank my good friends at Bedford Camera, bedfords.com. Hey, you know they've got the Nikkor Z800 6.3 in stock. Gorgeous lens. I have a lot of friends who shoot with that lens, love that lens. It's in stock. It's been at least 18 months it's been on the market, but finally, I guess they have caught up. Great, beautiful lens. If you want to get into critter work, this is a great lens. And of course, Bedford's has a lot of other great stuff. And remember, besides all that great inventory, great service, and great knowledge, they have that Moose discount when you check out. So, Bedfords.com. Thanks for sponsoring the Moose Podcast. Let's get into this week's episode. Bring color to life. And in a way, it comes from a poem that was read to me. It also comes from, people seem to be really worked up about AI stuff. And again, I just don't see it because the robots aren't going out there and they're not witnessing the world and they're not bringing it back. They have to work from what we create, which is a really quite similar to the way digital photography works. So before I begin, I want to just make sure we're clear on the same page. Digital photography. Digital works on data, ones and zeros. The more data it has, the better it can do its job. And who's responsible for the data collection? We are, photographers. So when it comes to, that file between the camera and the computer, the camera always is going to have the greatest amount of data to collect to make a photograph. The computer can only work with the information it is provided. Yes, you might say AI generation could, make up stuff. Back in the days, I kept saying, Sharon wanted to give me a t-shirt that says, I make up shit. Well, you could almost apply it to AI in some instances. So what I'm going to talk about is you, the photographer, at the point of capture with your camera. Bring color to life because you have the greatest amount of information in front of you that you're seeing that you're going to collect with that camera to bring back to share with the rest of us. Now, color, we are driven by color. And when I talk about color, I'm also talking about black and white photography because black and white and gray and all those different shades in between are still colors. They're not the vibrant colors, but they're definitely dramatic. So it all applies to all of that. And how you decide to incorporate one or all of my suggestions or a whole lot more, okay, is how you bring life to your color in your photographs and storytelling. With that said, what's the one of the easiest ways to bring color to life when it comes to our photography? Underexposure. Underexposure, I've talked about this many times. It seems to be such a simple tool. It's often forgotten by folks. But if you need more color, switching that tone curve with just a digital version of the old analog bell curve, by changing that underexposure by just a mere third of a stop, you instantly saturate colors. It's just the way it works. Yes, there's color science behind it. Yes, there's a lot of charts and graphs, but really, you want to go there? That's not much fun for photography. If you just do your own simple testing, experimenting, you'll find out. I am not talking about exposure bracketing here either. I'm talking about when you start to see that you want more color, just underexpose a third of a stop. You'd be surprised what happens. Now, do you stop there? No. Sometimes I will go as much as -5 stops, depending on the scenario. It is just a way in which we can bring color to life. And that's all I'm talking about, bringing color to life. Now, another, you could say, method of underexposure is shooting with saturated light. And saturated light is produced by clouds. Now, we're not talking about dark gray clouds. We're not talking about thin overcast. And it's something that, like any aspect of light in which color is the main component of, understanding that the saturated light that clouds can bring is just another of the weapons that we have to grab someone's attention. And it's hard, and this is hard, when you have saturated light, it's already kind of, you could say, underexposing. Saturated light has a low contrast when it comes to the range between the highlights and the shadows. So you might not need to underexpose so much for color saturation because the clouds themselves are doing it. And then that cloud adds a bit of blue content to the scenario, which in some cases could be a plus or a minus. So you have underexposure, you have saturated light, and that saturated light can, yes, bring up some blue color cast. So what do we do there? There, we work with white balance. Now you have to understand that what I'm talking about is not something you're going to find in some online class. You're not going to find the answer reading a book because it's going to give you graphs and charts, which holding up a book page with graph and charts and comparing it to what you're seeing with your eyes on a scene, I'm here to tell you, kind of hard to do. You could invest in a color meter, but then you have to learn how those work and then apply them. It's kind of like what I've mentioned before, memorizing the multiplication tables. You just have to start pushing yourself to learn. Because your underexposure, brings up the color, you have saturated light, then you might have blue color contrast. So then you have to think about white balance. Now, white balance, I've warned you many times, you're going to go down the rabbit hole with white balance if you go down there. But if you want to have consistent results, you want to be able to go out and shoot and know you're going to have this information in the highlights and the shadows. You're going to have the richest colors that camera can record to bring back to your computer. You have to go down the rabbit hole known as white balance. Because white balance, that slight blue color cast that's coming from that saturated light, you can deal with it with white balance. Now, here's just one of the zingers that come with the desire to bring color to life. Now, I understand a lot of people like to do it in post, and there are certain times that, even I will go into post to deal with some things, especially when it comes with some product shots or some studio shots some other mixed light shots that I might be doing with flash and ambient light on people. But here's one of the zingers as you're looking at it. One of the things about digital capture that I have noticed, never have gotten any satisfactory answer to it. But when you have a preponderance of green in the scene, I'll give you an example. I was down 2 weeks ago in Arizona photographing broadbill hummingbirds, which are a blue-green bird, and the background was all green. And I'm using A10 flashes. In fact, I just posted a video about this, the technical side. The biology side will be coming probably this next week. But anyway, you've got all this preponderance of green, and when you bring it into Adobe Camera Raw, you see the tint is whacked. So the tint, which probably should be in the teens, is in the 30s. And you'll look at it and your eye will say, there is something wrong here. And you've got all this light going on. You've got the saturated light on the background. You've got the daylight hitting the bird. And I don't know if that's the combo, but I've had it with Kodiak browns where they're eating nothing but green grass. I have it at times when I'm photographing the spring fawns and their rusty color in all the green grass. The tint just goes wacko. You have to bring the tint back down. Now, if you don't understand literally underexposure, saturated light, and white balance just to get started, then you're not going to see that tint. So if you go, you say to yourself, interesting. You pull up an image and you see the tints, up there, and you pull it back and all of a sudden you go, wow, look at that color all of a sudden pop. There is an indication you've got some homework to do, baby, because you need to be able to see that and understand it. And here's the part that's going to drive you nuts. Even though this is going to be happening in post, there's not one thing you do at the camera to make that tint perfect in the capture. It's just part of the nature of digital. So white balance, that's just one aspect of white balance. One that I've talked about a whole lot, of course, is when you see red in the sky, go to cloudy, because cloudy is 6,000 Kelvin, and that brings out the reds in those sunrises and sunsets. If you follow the website or my Instagram account, often I'll talk about how I've set the white balance to 9,000 or 10,000 Kelvin. So that information that you are capturing the camera and white balance, I don't care what anybody says, I can show you file after file to prove my point. White balance, when you nail it, you're going to have the greatest amount of information that digital camera can record. Capture, recording, all that information, when you nail the white balance, it just does a great job. And when you have those prevalent red, orange, some of the yellow tones in there, you actually are expanding, not to use a term that might confuse you, but that dynamic range of the color you're capturing when you nail the white balance vastly increased compared to just willy-nilly. So right off the bat, those things will bring color to life. That's what we want to do. We are such color-dominant critters that the more color we have in there, including black and whites, the more we grab people's attention, the more we can actually manipulate what they're seeing, what they're feeling, and the story you want to tell. Now, those three things oh man, we got so many tools. I mentioned Flash, didn't go into deeply, but you have all those Flash-oriented pieces there on YouTube and here on the website. But just understand that for myself, when it comes to critters, vast majority of the time I'm using Flash to clean up color only. That 5,500 Kelvin coming from that Flash bounces off the subject, camera eats it up, records the color accurately. And that's what you need. Flash is a great tool. Yes, I use Flash for other times when I need information, like when I'm doing a plane restoration, working in a hangar, things like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just general shooting. Now, one question I got this last week, which I got to tell you, made me, spray coffee all over the keyboard, was how many ProPhotos B1s do I take to do my landscape photography? To which you take that extension, they're assuming that I take those big flashes to light up the foreground and middle ground of my landscapes, which, yeah, I don't do that. That's a lot of work. I ain't doing that. So when I talk about flash, I'm talking about basically birds and working with people. And that is just a marvelous way of bringing color to life. What's another simple tool? The polarizer. Polarizer is a great tool. And like everything in photography, it is kind of a catch-22. Polarizer will remove the blue color cast from a bald sky. So you'll get better and cleaner greens and browns if, and here's the like everything else in photography, the rub, if the angle works. So in other words, if you're shooting directly towards the sun, a polarizer will do nothing for you. If the sun's on your back, it probably could do a lot for you. But if you're shooting with a fisheye lens, well, first, it's hard to filter. But because of the physics of a polarizer, you're going to see in the center, if you're looking, 180 degrees away from the sun and it's on your back, you'll see the darkest effect in front of you, and it's going to be lighter on the sides. So a polarizer can remove a reflection on an overall landscape, but it's a much more effective tool when you're shooting smaller segments. One of my favorite demos I like to show for how much information a polarizer brings out, it's the side of a P-40, an aircraft that has got reflected light from the sky above. In this case, it's a heavy overcast. But as I rotate the polarizer, you can see how all of a sudden all the pattern in the paint on the P-40 just pops out, where before it was hidden. So that's just another simple way of bringing color to life. It's the polarizer. It's going to do its job. It's going to remove reflections, color casts, so we can see the color that's being hidden. Now, there is the color psychology, and that paper on my website sure needs love. Not many people see it. But color psychology helps us, for lack of a better term, manipulate the viewer to see the colors and the things we want them to see in the photograph. Which leads me to my last and probably most potent weapon when it comes to bring color to life, and that's color contrast. If you are a Nik user, there's a color contrast in there, tonal contrast. Something came out of my head long ago, and it's based on color psychology. And just like you have exposure contrast, we have color contrast. Not going into the theory of the color wheel and all that kind of blah, 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 but basically, you can use color to make another color more vibrant, pop out, and have more life. And these are all these things. We're talking about underexposure, the polarizer, the white balance, saturated light, flash, color contrast, color psychology. All of these things can be used at one time together, or one or two, or combinations. There's more. That's just the beginning. You have how you can use white as an anchor point. You have how you can use black to see clean, more saturated. I mean, the list goes on. And it's upon you, the photographer, the way you want to tell your story, to learn these tools, the ones that apply to the way you want to grab my heartstrings and get me to suck in and look at your story, to go out and explore. I just want to bring it to your attention that understand that it's you, the one behind the camera that's pushing the button that makes everything happen. It is not the computer. It is you and that relationship you have with that camera and that lens, and more importantly, light, that brings color to life. You folks have a marvelous week. Thanks ever so much for stopping by. And remember to make every click your story.